the night came. Psyche placed a lantern beneath her bed and a knife under her pillow. And when her husband was fast asleep, she took out the lantern, lit its wick, and held it over his face. But what she saw in the lantern's glow was no monster, but Eros, the god of love. And Psyche was so taken aback that her hand began to shake. And this trembling caused a drop of burning oil to fall on Eros' shoulder. With a start, he awoke and cried, "Oh, Psyche, what have you done? My sisters, they told me you were a monster, and I only wanted to find out if what they said was true." "But Psyche, you promised me you would not listen to your sisters. Don't you know that without trust, there can never be love?" And so saying, Eros sprang out the window. Psyche grabbed a hold of his foot just as he was lifting from the ground. But next moment her strength failed and she plummeted back to earth. Wishing to end her life, she stumbled to the river's edge, and with head bowed in anguish she whispered, "Dear river, should Eros ever return to your banks, tell him that though I died alone, without him by my side, my heart from within its watery grave will always beat with love for him and him alone." Psyche then threw herself into the river. But the river did not want her life and gently washed her back to its bank. And there Psyche stayed all night long, weeping. When the morning came, Psyche rose to her feet, determined to find Eros, who all the while was up in the clouds at his mother's palace, recovering from his burn. But though Eros had said nothing to Aphrodite about his secret marriage to Psyche, she soon learned about it from a talkative white seagull. What? Betrayed by my own son? He shall be punished and she shall die. And with these words, Aphrodite mounted her golden chariot, and she sped through the skies, looking for Psyche. When Aphrodite finally spotted Psyche, she steered her chariot through the steep air and pulled it next to the terrified girl. Face to face with Psyche, Aphrodite said, "Foul creature, do you realize how deeply you have offended me?" "Aphrodite, it is not in my power to offend you. I am just a simple girl, and you a mighty goddess." "Well spoken, Psyche, but offend me you have. First you steal my admirers, and then you burn my son." "Oh, Aphrodite, you've seen Eros? Oh, please tell me where he is." "And why should I do that?" "Because I love him with all my heart." "Well, your heart is not enough. If you ever want to see Eros again, you must first prove yourself worthy by performing some tasks." "Oh, anything. What must I do?" Aphrodite then pointed to the east. "Do you see that meadow beyond the river? In that meadow lives a flock of golden sheep, solar rams. I want you to go and gather some of their wool, because I wish to weave a golden cape. And if you fail to do so, death shall be your bridegroom." And without another word, Aphrodite cracked her whip and charged up into the sky. Full of hope, Psyche journeyed to the meadow. But when she got close, all hope fled. The sheep were fierce and wild. Sparks shot from their eyes. Their long teeth glittered like knives. Psyche knew if she approached, she would be torn to shreds. And so for the longest time, she stood at the edge of the meadow, her face a mask of horror as the fearsome creatures crackled and flashed and burned. But finally, her love for Eros proved stronger than her fear. Emboldened, she took a step towards the meadow. And the moment she did, something quite extraordinary happened. A reed growing by the river began to sway. It then sang, "Psyche, sometimes battles are best won with patience. At twilight, those sheep will go to sleep beneath the trees. Then you can safely enter the meadow and gather the golden wool clinging to the bushes." And this Psyche did. But when Aphrodite returned and saw Psyche standing with an armful of golden wool, she roared, "You've been helped, and so I must give you another task, a much harder task." Aphrodite pointed to the west. "Do you see that mountain? At the top of that mountain issues an icy stream of water. Water from the river of the dead." Aphrodite then handed Psyche a jar of polished crystal and instructed her to fill it to the brim with the sacred black water. And if Psyche failed to do so, she would die. And with these terrible words ringing in Psyche's ears, Aphrodite tore up into the sky. Full of resolve, Psyche journeyed to the mountain. But when she drew close, she saw that this task too was impossible. The sides of the mountain were smooth and steep, and around its base hissed hundreds and hundreds of twisting silver snakes. Knowing it would be foolish to attempt such a task alone, Psyche fell to her knees and she called out to the gods for help. Hearing her, an enormous eagle suddenly swooped down from the sky. The eagle snatched up the crystal jar, and as Psyche looked on in amazement, it soared up to the sacred black stream. But when Aphrodite returned and saw Psyche standing with the brimming vial, her face darkened with rage. "You've been helped again, and so I must give you one last task, a task you cannot perform and live. I want you to go down into the earth, Psyche, and get from Queen Persephone the chest of beauty. I am attending a banquet tomorrow, and I wish to look my best." Thereupon, Aphrodite cracked her whip and swept up into the sky. chill shot through Psyche's body. She knew that all the grasses and eagles in the world could not help her now. There was only one way to get to the world of the dead, and that was to die. But I'd rather be dead than live without Eros, Psyche thought to herself. And so when she came to a tall stone tower standing in an open field, she climbed up its winding steps and walked to the edge of the roof. But just as she was preparing to throw herself to the ground, the tower suddenly broke into speech and said, "Psyche, do not do as you are planning to do. Open your heart to my words. In the nearby city of Daenerys is a great pole with a barley cake in each hand. Enter that hole. You will then be on your way to the kingdom of Hades, the land of the dead." The tower then explained that on her way, many figures would cry out for help. But Psyche was not to help them. All these figures were traps designed by Aphrodite to make Psyche drop the barley cakes. But without the cakes, she would never be able to pass through the gates of Hades. For guarding these gates was an enormous three-headed dog named Cerberus, his blazing eyes big as saucers. But if Psyche threw him a cake, he would allow her to enter and exit in safety. The tower also said that when she stood before Queen Persephone, she would be offered a fine feast and ebony chair. But she was to refuse the feast and chair, sit on the ground, and request only a crust of bread. If Psyche did these things, she would receive the chest of beauty. And once the chest was in her hands, she was to return at once to the upper world, and under no circumstance open the chest. And so Psyche went down, deep into the earth, and everything happened just as the tower had described. An old man, burdened beneath the load of heavy wood, cried out, "Psyche, help me!" But Psyche did not help him. 3 women, weaving a cloth of black and white, wailed, "Psyche, help us weave the cloth of destiny!" But Psyche did not help them. She threw Cerberus a barley cake. He allowed her to pass through the gates of Hades. And when she stood before Queen Persephone, she refused the fine feast and ebony chair, sat on the ground, and requested only a crust of bread. And once the chest of beauty was in her hands, she returned at once to the upper world. But then Psyche did what she was not supposed to do. Wishing to appear more beautiful in the eyes of Eros, should she ever find him again, Psyche wanted to anoint herself with 1 drop just one drop of divine beauty. And so Psyche opened the chest. But for Psyche there was no beauty. Out drifted a deadly vapor of sleep, and the sleep wrapped itself around Psyche, and she fell unconscious to the ground.